Welcome to the Own Your Family.
Thank you for inviting me to be here. It's such a privilege, and it's so great to see you. So excited about what's happening in the Philippines and our ramp up to get there. But yeah, I have some slides to share with you all and kind of walk you through, like Josie said, why I think our products are just so unbelievable and why they're so different than anything else in the marketplace. But Josie reminded me of something not that long ago. So I don't know, maybe people were here and they saw this, but she reminded me of an entrance that I made at a big convention that we had. So maybe you recognize the crazy guy riding down the stairs in the stadium on a bicycle. Anyway, that was a great memory, Josie. Thanks for reminding me of it. But what I specifically want to talk about today is disruptive innovation, and especially disruptive innovation in nutrition. So let's first talk about, well, what is disruptive innovation? And just in case you're not familiar, disruptive innovation is an innovation that creates an entirely new market and eventually disrupts an existing market, displacing even the largest, most well-established market-leading companies and their products. So let's talk about some examples of where this has happened in the past. I mean, think about how we're all making phone calls now. We're not tied to cords anymore. I used to have a long cord on my phone and run it into my bedroom to speak on the phone. And then with the invention of cellular phones, right, we were able to literally cut the cord. Or think about horse and buggy. That's how we used to get around. But now who is really riding horses and buggies anymore to get anywhere? So with the invention of the car, it really put the buggy business out of business. And who knows, one day we'll probably all be riding around in self-driving electric cars. Think about when we used to have to go to the library to have to do research. I mean, think about what the internet has done to even just libraries, the encyclopedia business, just a completely disruptive technology. Or how about film photography? How many of us are still taking photos with film? It does still exist, even as a novelty. There's some new kind of new age Polaroid, Polaroid cameras that have come around. But digital photography is just about what everybody's using these days. And not just cell phones, but think about what the iPhone has done to the cell phone business. I mean, now we all expect to be able to browse the internet, to be able to listen to music and make calls with our digital devices. Unbelievable what the iPhone's done. Or even think about the gig economy and where we are today. Think about what Uber and Lyft have done to the taxi business, or think about what Airbnb or VRBO or those other competitors have done to the hotel business. Think about what direct selling has done to retail. I mean, these gig economies have just completely disrupted many, many different marketplaces. Think about how we're even meeting today. I mean, the thought of just utilizing Zoom every day for multiple meetings was just unheard of a couple years ago, but now it's so common and we all sit through so many different virtual presentations. But what about disruptive innovation in nutrition? I mean, have you ever thought about this? What's been going on in the nutrition space? Well, to maybe couch that just a little bit, I want to ask you this question. And do you know when the last 3 essential vitamins were discovered? Or even what they were? Well, how about vitamin K, discovered in 1939? I mean, how many years ago was that? Folate, discovered in 1941, and vitamin B12 was discovered in 1948. The last vitamin to be discovered was almost in 1950. So if you think about this, we have known everything the human body needs to function for the last 70 to 80 years. I would argue there hasn't been a whole lot of innovative disruption in the nutrition space. What a lot of companies are doing is coming up with new marketing messages to be able to spin a really old message, right? A 70 to 80-year-old message that we need to take vitamins and minerals. But to think about this even further, like I said, there really hasn't been any innovation in nutrition until recently, and especially what LifeVantage has been doing. And this notion is known as Nutragenomics. So this is really utilizing nutrition to turn on health promoting genes. So, we have tens of thousands of genes inside of our DNA locked up inside of every single cell in our body. And there are hundreds, if not thousands, of those genes that we can unlock when we use the right nutrients in the right ratios to turn on these genes. And it's an extraordinary process. And these genes are so important to our health. They have names like survival genes, anti-stress genes, antioxidant genes, detoxification genes, anti-aging genes. I mean, who doesn't want to look a little bit younger? So just those names alone should illustrate how important these genes are to our health. But when we're talking about nutrigenomics, really we're talking about three different things. So we're talking about these nutrients that can unlock this gene activation. And the way that these nutrients are doing that is through activating various cell signaling pathways inside of our body. And these cell signaling pathways are nothing more than our cell's internal communication system. So their job is to communicate within the cell and between other cells in our body exactly what's going on. And that leads our cells to adapt and respond to whatever environment it may be sensing. So I'm going to talk about nutrigenomics, but as I get into nutrigenomics, I want to ask you this question. Do you need a brain to be intelligence? Is this about what? A pound, 1.5 kilo organ on top of our shoulders. Is that where intelligence lies? Or does intelligence lie somewhere else? And to do this, I love to look at definitions. And so the definition of intelligence is this ability to learn or understand things. And I think most of us would associate that first part of the definition as intelligence as we traditionally think about it. Somebody who's really good in school, somebody who excels at their job. But what's so intriguing to me is the second part of the definition. And this is that ability to deal with new or difficult situations. Okay, so keep that second part of this definition in the back of your minds as we go through this. I'm going to talk about some different organisms and kind of highlight the intelligence that these different organisms have, whether they have no brain at all, a primitive brain, or even really advanced brains. So bacteria, let's start here. A single-celled organism that is far more successful on the face of this earth than human beings have been. So if we took all the bacteria on the face of this earth and put it on one side of a scale, put all the human beings on the other side of the scale, the weight of those bacteria would far outweigh what humans weigh on this earth. They're single-celled and they clearly do not have a brain. What about seeds? They don't have a brain. Or plants. We put a seed in the ground, and how do those roots know to grow down and those leaves to grow up? Ants. So ants are insects, and insects do have primitive brains, but they do highly intelligent behavior, right? For example, how do ants know to live in this incredibly complex social network? How do they know how to follow trails to find food or water? What if we highlight fish? How do fish know to swim in schools? How do they know to look for food? Dogs. If you've ever played with a dog, how do dogs know how to fetch? Horses. Most mammals on the face of this earth, not humans, but most mammals on the face of this earth can walk just a few minutes after they're born. So are we saying that horses are smarter than humans? Or is there some sort of intelligence that's going on here? I mean, we can even think about ourselves with these highly advanced and complicated brains. If we get a small little paper cut on our finger, how does that cut know how to heal? And it turns out to be this highly coordinated process that's happening really localized in those skin cells It also involves our immune system. So how does all of this coordination go on to ultimately heal that wound? Think about yourself sitting here. Are you thinking about all the blood that's going through your veins and arteries? Are you thinking about all the nerve impulses that are shooting up and down your nerves? Are you thinking about how you're breathing? You probably weren't until I just said it. Are you thinking about digesting your last meal? Think about your bones and your muscles. If you were fortunate enough to get a workout in today, are you thinking about those bones remodeling themselves and building themselves back stronger? The same with your muscles. Are you thinking about actually building up those muscles? Well, I would argue we're not thinking about them in our brain, and there's something else that's happening someplace else in all of these cells that we've highlighted today. So again, do we really need a brain to be intelligent, or might intelligence kind of reside somewhere else inside of the cell? So what do all of these things have in common? You know, if you were to ask me, what would you call it? Would you call it luck? Would you call it skill? Adaptation? Maybe. I think we're getting a little bit closer. If you were to ask me, I would call it instinct. These cells, these tissues, these organs just know how to do these things, okay? And this instinct resides in our DNA and our genes, okay? But our DNA and genes are buried pretty deep inside of our cells. So how do we unlock this potential or this instinct? Well, I think of DNA as being nothing more than a blueprint, just like this blueprint on the screen. There's a ton of information here, but this blueprint cannot build the house, right? It takes some very skilled workers to be able to read this blueprint and then are able to direct other workers to actually build that house. So then we have to ask the question, if DNA is just the information, who are the workers in the cell that are reading that DNA and directing what's going on? And that answer is proteins, and we can even say enzymes as well. So proteins and enzymes are really the things inside of the cell that are doing the work. So then we have to ask the question, okay, well, who's the boss inside of the cell? Who's directing the workers to do their jobs? And it turns out to be this thing, this communication network that we call cellular signaling. And to say it even more appropriately, it's coordinated cellular signaling that happens inside of the cell. It's not an accidental thing that's happening. It's this highly advanced process where our cells are communicating, like I said, internally or with cells throughout our bodies. But it's nothing more than going from A to B to C to D, right? So these different proteins are telling each other kind of what to do, where to go, and then eventually something will happen inside of the cell. So here is an actual schematic of a cell signaling pathway. And this is just one of hundreds or maybe even thousands of cell signaling pathways that are inside of our bodies. But this same sequence of events is happening. So something happens that activates a protein. So we'll call it protein A. Protein A tells protein B, tells protein C, tells protein D, and then something happens inside of the cell. Okay. So what is initiating this cellular signaling? What activates that protein A inside of our bodies? And these things are called receptors. And receptors are just these little sensing molecules that wait for the right signal to come along and activate it so that chain of events can happen. They are very specific in how they work. So that signaling molecule has to be really specific to bind into that receptor or sensing molecule. And it's a lot like a lock and a key. So just like the keys to my front door won't open your front door or vice versa, the same thing is happening inside of our cells. Not all signaling molecules activate all receptors. So a lot of specificity that's happening here. And so at the top of this schematic, you can see those gray triangles or gray circles. These are those signaling molecules that can activate the receptors so that ultimately something happens inside of the cell. But that's a lot of science, I know. A simple way that I like to look at it is nothing more than dominoes, right? So we can push over dominoes, and then usually people who set these things up love for a great grand finale to happen. So there's some terminal consequence, if you will, that happens after you've pushed over these dominoes. So I'm going to show you a little video that kind of illustrates this. But watch how just one tiny little input, that finger knocking over one domino, will ultimately knock over all of these dominoes. So this is really very analogous to what's happening inside of our cells. But where the real power of being able to activate these cell signaling pathways comes from is there can be signal amplification. Like you just saw, one domino can knock over those probably tens of thousands of dominoes that were there. But here's another short little video that illustrates this. So this first domino that this gentleman's going to knock over weighs just a couple of grams. And ultimately, it's going to knock over that last domino that weighs about 50 kilograms. Right? It's amazing. So with these cell signaling pathways, there can be this signal amplification. I could probably give you a couple of real world scenarios that might resonate a little more with you. But, if I were to inject testosterone inside of my body, go to the gym, lift big, heavy weights, I would be able to put on unphysiological amounts of muscle. Or also think we give women tiny little birth control pills, and we can completely remodel their reproductive physiology. So these really small inputs, because of that signal amplification that goes on inside of the cell, can have massive physiological benefits or consequences to the cell. So if we talk about these cell signaling pathways, ultimately, what is their purpose? Why are they even there? And if you remember that second part of that definition of intelligence, right, it's to react and respond to whatever internal or external environment that the cell might be experiencing. This is exactly what's coordinating this cellular instinct. And we can leverage this to our advantage by being able to ultimately activate these health promoting systems and genes inside of our bodies. And it literally doesn't matter which cell signaling pathway we look at, they all are basically working in this same regard. So this is nutragenomics, utilizing the right nutrients in the right combination to activate these cell signaling pathways to turn on these very important health promoting genes to help keep us as healthy as humanly possible. And this is exactly how LifeVantage is disrupting in human nutrition. You will see this concept of nutragenomics sprinkled in throughout our entire product line. So whether it's our skincare products, we are leveraging nutragenomics to make our skin as healthy and as young looking as possible. And then our core product line, what we call our Protandem family of products, are all based on this notion of nutragenomics. And this is why you'll see the tagline, flip the switch, feel better, and do more. And so by flipping the switch, we're talking about that activation and flipping the switches on these health promoting genes to help us support our body really from the inside out. And I should say too, before I sign off and hand it back over to Josie, LifeVantage was originally founded in 2013 on this entire premise of nutragenomics. And in fact, in 2003, the term nutragenomics hadn't even been coined yet. So LifeVantage is the pioneers in this nutragenomic space and was literally doing it before there was actually a word for it. So this is how innovative and just pioneering LifeVantage is. And I hope that gives you just a quick little snapshot of the power of harnessing the power within our bodies by unlocking it with nutrition can have these massive health consequences for people who are taking our products. So with that, Josie, I'll hand it back over to you.
Thanks for listening. Join our online family by signing up for your free account at www.ownyourfamily.com and begin your journey to freedom. Want to get there faster? Book a strategy call with us at ownyourfamily.com/book a call. As always, be sure to leave a rating and subscribe to our podcast and channel so you never miss a future episode.